Scientists were shocked by what they saw when they examined the DNA sample taken from Anunnaki King's tomb. The genetic code showed patterns that didn't match any known human lineage, leaving researchers both stunned and speechless. Rumors began to spread that the DNA contained non-human sequences, something that hinted at origins far beyond Earth. Governments stayed silent, archives were sealed, and the mystery only grew deeper. In this video, we're going to break down what scientists discovered, why it's causing such confusion, and what it could mean about the true nature of the Anunnaki.
If the whole Anunnaki story is a global story of a non-human intelligence that was manipulating genes all over the planet, that it wasn't just gold, it was a planetary base.
The term most people mean when they say Anunnaki comes from texts written in the region of southern Mesopotamia, where people who used Sumerian as a language recorded stories, poems, and lists on clay tablets. Those records include names for groups of gods, references to divine family trees, and mythic accounts of how the world and human beings came to be. In Sumerian lists and later Akkadian adaptations, there are deities whose names sometimes include the element An, the sky god, or who are referred to as offspring or members of a divine household.
Zechariah Sitchin wrote a number of well-received books on the Anunnaki, which he believed were basically extraterrestrial entities from a planet called Nibiru.
Scholars who study Sumerian language and Mesopotamian religion read these texts and see a system of gods, cults, priestly cult practices, temple economics, and ritual tales about kingship, law, and order.
The Anunnaki had damaged their atmosphere, and by using gold, they found that they could patch these atmospheric holes. Becomes the story of our humanity. The Anunnaki literally came to Earth to mine the gold. And when realizing it was such a toil to do so, created us as a worker race to do that for them.
The word that modern readers render as Anunnaki appears in some of those lists and mythic accounts and seems to refer to a group of powerful divine beings used differently in different texts. In the late 20th century, the name Anunnaki moved out of specialist circles and into popular books and media that offered a very different reading. One influential modern claim reinterpreted Sumerian names and myths as records of contacts between humans and visitors from beyond Earth. According to this view, the Anunnaki were not gods in the religious sense, but extraterrestrial beings who arrived here and influenced early human societies, giving people technology, knowledge, and even genetic changes. This idea became central to a broader ancient visitors, or ancient astronauts genre that treats early religious writings as literal reports of advanced outsiders rather than symbolic, religious, or political texts created by local cultures. The most distinctive version of this modern claim links the Anunnaki to a scenario where a planet outside the familiar system, sometimes given a name such as Nibiru, is said to have a long elliptical orbit that brings it near Earth periodically. Proponents suggest that beings from that planet came to Earth in the distant past to mine resources, especially gold, and they needed labor for that task. In this telling, humans were created or modified to serve as workers. The story draws on a mix of readings of Sumerian clay tablets, misread or selectively quoted archaeological finds, and modern interpretations of myth as literal history. A key modern popularizer argued that Sumerian words translated in a specialist way have a different, hidden technical meaning that supports the planet and mining tale. That claim rests on reinterpreting Sumerian grammar, equating descriptive mythic language with technical prose, and treating fragmentary tablet passages as complete, literal records of events. When we weigh that claim against what specialists actually say, problems appear quickly. For anyone trained in Sumerian, Akkadian, or the study of Mesopotamian culture, the tablets are literary, religious, legal, and administrative documents. Many tablets are administrative records, lists of rations, accounts for temple stores, lists of workers, and records of offerings. Others are hymns, myths, royal inscriptions, and omen texts. Sumerian and Akkadian writers use metaphor, symbolic family genealogy, and religious language to describe relationships among gods, the role of kings, and the order of the cosmos. A tablet that names a group associated with the sky god is not the same kind of source as a technical log of a spaceship landing. Translating Sumerian is hard, and it requires context. Isolated words can have multiple meanings, grammar matters, line breaks and damaged fragments change how a passage reads. Reliable transliterations and translations come from careful work that compares many copies, looks at parallel texts, and uses established methods. The modern visitors' readings often ignore that context and instead pick a single, appealing reading and treat it as fixed truth. Archaeological claims linked to the visitors' narrative also require close scrutiny. Some promoters claim to find evidence of advanced technology in old structures, or to find artifacts that have odd shapes or marks that suggest non-local origins. But most professional archaeologists examine artifacts for known local production techniques, trade patterns, and cultural styles. Tools change over time because of local invention, resource needs, and cultural exchange, not because outsiders showed up once and handed over future tech. What looks strange to a modern eye often has a local explanation when studied with the right comparative framework. For example, a stylized carving that seems like a modern machine may actually be a ritual image, a symbol, or part of a long iconographic tradition that makes sense within the culture when similar motifs are examined across related sites and periods. One recurring problem with the visitor's reading is selective evidence. The claims rest on a few lines from tablets, a handful of artifacts, and modern simulations or imagery that seem to support a dramatic narrative. But when scholars check the full corpus of texts, most passages do not match the claims. Many texts explicitly present gods as appropriate subjects of worship and ritual. In the larger body of literature, gods speak, fight, make oaths, and pass on favors to kings. Human kings claim legitimacy because a god gave them rule. Mythic narratives have clear forms that match other mythic systems worldwide, where personified forces act to explain natural cycles, social order, and political authority. These kinds of stories do not carry the tone of a technical report or a historical chronicle that modern readers expect for an event log. Another layer of evidence critics examine is language history and translation practice. Translating Sumerian and Akkadian requires training in philology and comparative grammar. Misreading one word or changing the grammatical role of a term can distort the meaning of a passage. Some modern proponents of the visitor's thesis rely on ad hoc reinterpretations of core terms and claim that specialist translations have missed a hidden technical sense. But linguistic methods are rigorous for a reason. When scholarship proposes alternate meanings, it documents parallels, phonetic reconstructions, and semantic shifts. The visitor's reading often lacks that comparative documentation. Instead, it asserts that hidden meanings were deliberately obscured, or that earlier scholars were unaware of a secret technical vocabulary. That claim is implausible because many texts are bilingual or have variants. Scribes copied and reused material across centuries, and temples kept extensive libraries. If a technical, literal account of interplanetary travel existed, one would expect multiple copies and consistent phrasing across texts. What exists shows a wide range of literary forms and diverse theological emphases. The person most often associated with the modern Anunnaki as aliens idea wrote popular books that combined literal readings of selected texts with modern astronomical speculation. His claims reached a broad audience because he told a simple, dramatic story that connects the origin of human civilization to high drama: contact, creation, and control. His writing style presented a closed system. Take this reading of the tablets, combine it with a belief in a hidden planet, and you have an origin story for humanity. That tidy narrative is compelling to many readers because it promises a single explanation for puzzles that experts treat more cautiously. It also fits a wider set of claims about suppressed knowledge and elite conspiracy, which some people find plausible when faced with large, complex histories they do not know how to read. The appeal of the visitor's version is understandable. It makes ancient texts read like a science fiction script. It assigns agency to a non-human intelligence and thus offers an easy answer to big unknowns. Who gave humans tools? Where did sudden leaps in urban life come from? Those are real questions. Archaeology does show periods where technology, craft specialization, and urbanism appear relatively quickly within the archaeological record. But specialists explain those shifts using a model that combines long-term local experimentation, population density, trade networks, and institutional change. City life emerged where people had reasons to organize larger groups: irrigation and food production, craft specialization, long-distance exchange, and elites who could coordinate labor. These are messy processes with multiple interacting causes. They do not require an extraterrestrial explanation. Instead, they reward patient study of settlement patterns, pottery styles, metallurgical remains, and written records that show administrative changes across time. Another point to consider is the way myth functions in societies. Myths serve to justify power, communicate social values, and explain the human place in the world. A creation myth that says a god formed humans from clay and breath is doing moral and social work, not providing a technical biography. When a king claims the favor of a god, that claim is a political instrument. It legitimizes authority and binds people to a shared system. Treating such claims as straightforward historical testimony reverses the logic of their original use. It ignores how these cultures thought and wrote about their world. When people then present mythic language as a secret technical record, they undercut the original meaning and treat texts in ways their creators would not recognize. Popular accounts also sometimes treat chronology carelessly. Mesopotamian history spans many centuries and involves many shifting cities, dynasties, and languages. Sumerian as a literary language retains older forms into later periods, and Akkadian speakers adapted Sumerian myths to their own settings. Treating all texts as if they were written at the same time or by the same group leads to confusion. The visitor's reading tends to flatten these differences and present a single timeline that matches the desired plot. Genuine scholarship takes time to map which text comes from which period, which city, and which scribal tradition. That detail matters. It changes how scholars evaluate supposed corroborations and how they align textual evidence with archaeological layers and radiocarbon dates. Some defenders of the visitor's idea respond by saying, mainstream scholarship is part of a conspiracy to hide proof of alien contact. That claim relies on mistrust of institutions and a presumption that complex academic work is either incompetent or deliberately deceitful. But peer review, open excavation reports, and the global patchwork of contributors to Mesopotamian studies make a sustained, effective, worldwide cover-up highly unlikely. Different teams working independently over decades have published finds, transliterations, and interpretations. If there were striking proof of non-human technology, multiple teams across multiple countries would have incentive to participate in the discovery and publication. Instead, what researchers share are incremental advances in understanding texts and sites, revisions to translation where new fragments appear, and debates about the meaning of difficult passages. That normal scholarly process explains why so many popular claims remain unsupported. The visitor's narrative also borrows from modern fascination with space, technology, and the unknown. It maps contemporary ideas onto old texts. There is a human tendency to project our current concerns into past stories. Just as some older accounts were read in earlier centuries as literal history or moral allegory depending on the time, Our own age reads the past through lenses shaped by film, science, and the internet. That interpretive lens can make the past feel like a stage set for current anxieties and hopes. Fears about who controls power, hopes about contact with other beings, and curiosity about how we got here. Those are valid human feelings, but they are not the same as rigorous historical explanation. One interesting aspect of the Anunnaki theory is the claim that they altered human DNA using snake-like genetics. This idea comes from modern interpretations of Sumerian myths that describe the Anunnaki as advanced beings who created or modified humans. Some versions of this theory suggest that the serpent in ancient stories represents genetic manipulation rather than a literal snake. Supporters claim that the double helix shape of DNA resembles the ancient symbol of two serpents winding around a staff, which appears in many cultures. They argue that this is evidence that early humans remembered the Anunnaki's genetic experiments, but expressed them symbolically. In these interpretations, the Anunnaki are said to have used their own DNA to mix with primitive humans, creating a hybrid species capable of working for them, especially in mining or labor tasks. The snake becomes a symbol of knowledge, transformation, and the genetic awakening of humanity. Some also connect this idea to the story of the serpent in the Garden of Eden, saying that it represents forbidden genetic knowledge passed from the Anunnaki to humans. If you found this discovery as fascinating as we did, make sure to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and watch our next video, where we reveal more hidden truths about ancient civilizations.